Storms of your life. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the old wooden porch where 12-year-old Tommy sat, his shoulders slumped and his face creased with worry. The gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine from his grandmother's garden, but today, even the sweetest fragrance couldn't lift his spirits. Grandpa Walter slowly made his way to the porch, his weathered hands gripping his favorite walking stick. At 78, he had seen countless storms, both in the sky and in life. His silver hair caught the morning light as he settled beside his grandson with a soft grunt. "You're up early today, son," Walter said, his voice carrying the warmth of honey mixed with gravel. "Something weighing heavy on your heart?" Tommy fidgeted with the hem of his green t-shirt, avoiding his grandfather's knowing gaze. The boy had always found it easy to talk to Grandpa Walter, but today felt different. Today, the problem seemed too big, too overwhelming for words. "Grandpa," Tommy finally whispered, "what do you do when everything in your life feels like it's falling apart?" Walter studied his grandson's face, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the way his small hands trembled slightly. He had watched Tommy grow from a curious toddler into a bright, sensitive boy, and he recognized the signs of a young heart carrying too much burden. "Tell me what's happening, Tommy," Walter said gently, placing a comforting hand on the boy's shoulder. The words tumbled out like water through a broken dam. Tommy's parents had been fighting more frequently, their voices echoing through the thin walls late at night. His best friend Marcus had moved away without warning when his father lost his job. At school, Tommy was struggling with math, and his teacher, Mrs. Henderson, seemed to notice every mistake he made. To make matters worse, the family dog, Buster, had been diagnosed with a serious illness that would require expensive treatment. "It feels like a storm that never ends," Tommy said, his voice cracking. "Every time I think things might get better, something else goes wrong. I don't understand why bad things keep happening to good people. Why can't life just be easy?" Walter listened without interruption, nodding occasionally to show he understood. When Tommy finished, silence settled between them like a comfortable blanket. In the distance, birds chirped their morning songs, and the sound of Mrs. Peterson watering her garden next door created a gentle rhythm. "You know, Tommy," Walter began slowly, "I want to tell you something about storms that most people don't understand." The old man stood up carefully and walked to the edge of the porch, gazing out at the small town where he had lived for over 50 years. The houses looked peaceful in the morning light, their gardens lush and green from recent rains. "When I was about your age," Walter continued, "my family lost our farm during the Great Depression. My father had worked that land for 20 years, and suddenly, we had nothing. I was angry, confused, and scared. I asked my own grandfather the same question you just asked me." Tommy looked up, surprised. He had never heard this story before. "My grandfather was a wise man, much like his grandfather before him," Walter said, settling back down beside Tommy. "He took me to see old Mrs. Chen, who lived at the edge of town. She had the most beautiful garden anyone had ever seen, roses that bloomed larger than dinner plates, vegetables that fed half the neighborhood, fruit trees that bent under the weight of their bounty." Walter paused, watching as a butterfly landed on the porch railing, its wings catching the sunlight. "I expected to hear another story about hard work and patience," Walter continued. "But Mrs. Chen surprised me. She said, 'Walter, do you know what makes my garden so beautiful?'" "What did she say?" Tommy asked, leaning closer. "She said it wasn't the sunshine or the good soil, though those helped. It was the storms." Walter's eyes twinkled as he saw Tommy's confused expression. "She explained that when storms come, they do more than just water the plants. The wind shakes the trees, making their roots grow deeper and stronger. The lightning adds nitrogen to the soil. The pressure changes help plants grow taller and more resilient." Walter pointed to an old oak tree in their yard, its massive trunk scarred but magnificent. "See that tree, Tommy? It's over 100 years old. Look closely at its trunk, do you see those marks and twisted places?" Tommy nodded, studying the tree's weathered bark. "Each mark tells the story of a storm it survived," Walter explained. "The twisted parts are where it grew around obstacles, finding new ways to reach the light. If that tree had lived in perfect weather its whole life, it would be weak, with shallow roots. But because it faced storms, it became strong enough to shelter generations of families, including ours." The old man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook, its pages yellowed with age. "This belonged to my grandfather," Walter said, opening it carefully. "After Mrs. Chen taught me about storms. I started writing down every difficult time in my life, and then later, I wrote about how those difficulties helped me grow. He flipped through several pages before finding what he was looking for. Here, he said, pointing to an entry. When I lost my job at the factory in 1962, I thought it was the worst thing that could happen. But losing that job forced me to start my own carpentry business, which allowed me to be home more when your father was growing up. That storm led to some of the best years of my life. Tommy studied the notebook, seeing page after page filled with his grandfather's careful handwriting. The storm that brought your grandmother and me together was when her first fiancé left her at the altar, Walter continued with a gentle smile. She was heartbroken, but if that hadn't happened, I never would have met the love of my life at the library where she went to hide and heal. The morning air seemed to grow warmer as Walter spoke, and Tommy felt something shifting inside his chest, not the heavy weight of despair, but something lighter, more hopeful. But Grandpa, Tommy said quietly, it still hurts. The storms still feel scary when you're in the middle of them. Of course they do, Walter replied, wrapping his arm around his grandson. Fear and pain are natural responses to difficulty. The key isn't to stop feeling those emotions, but to remember that they're temporary, just like storms. Walter closed the notebook and held it out to Tommy. I want you to have this, he said. Not just my grandfather's words, but the empty pages at the back. Start writing your own storms, Tommy. Write about what you're feeling now, and then, months or years from now, write about how this difficult time helped you grow. Tommy accepted the notebook with reverence, running his fingers over the worn leather cover. Your parents fighting might teach you the importance of communication in relationships, Walter continued thoughtfully. Missing Marcus might help you appreciate the friends you'll make in the future. Struggling with math might push you to develop better study habits that will serve you for life. And caring for Buster during his illness might deepen your compassion and teach you about the precious nature of love. As if summoned by his name, Buster appeared around the corner of the house, his tail wagging weakly but his eyes bright. Despite his illness, he still greeted each day with optimism. Look at him, Walter said softly. Even in his storm, he finds reasons to be happy. Tommy knelt down and gently petted Buster, feeling the dog's unconditional love flowing through his touch. The storms of your life aren't punishments, son, Walter said, his voice filled with decades of hard-earned wisdom. They're preparations. They're making you stronger, deeper, more compassionate. They're teaching you skills you'll need for the bigger challenges and greater joys that lie ahead. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the temperature began to rise. In the distance, Tommy could hear the sounds of the neighborhood waking up, car doors closing, children laughing, the distant hum of lawnmowers. What if the storm feels too big? Tommy asked. What if I don't think I'm strong enough? Walter smiled, remembering asking his grandfather the same question all those years ago. That's when you remember that you're not facing the storm alone, he said. You have family who loves you, friends who care about you, teachers who want you to succeed, and a God who believes in your strength even when you don't believe in it yourself. He gestured toward the old oak tree again. That tree doesn't face storms by itself either. Its roots are connected to an entire network underground, other trees, plants, and even fungi that share nutrients and support each other. When storms come, they all hold each other up. Tommy looked around at the neighborhood with new eyes. Mrs. Peterson waved from her garden. Mr. Rodriguez was helping his elderly neighbor carry groceries. Children rode their bicycles in groups, looking out for each other. We're all connected, Tommy, Walter said. Your storms affect others, and their storms affect you. But that also means their strength supports you, just like yours will support them when their difficult times come. As the morning progressed, Tommy felt the tight knot in his chest beginning to loosen. The problems hadn't disappeared, his parents would likely still fight, math would still be challenging, and Buster would still need expensive treatment. But somehow, these challenges felt less overwhelming, more manageable. There's one more thing, Walter said, standing up slowly and stretching his back. The most beautiful flowers, the strongest trees, and the most incredible gardens always grow in places that have experienced the most storms. Your difficulties aren't signs that something is wrong with your life, Tommy. They're signs that something magnificent is being prepared. Tommy opened the notebook to the first blank page and wrote the date. Then, in careful handwriting, he began to document his current storm, just as his great-grandfather and grandfather had done before him. As he wrote, he realized that putting his feelings into words made him feel less frightening, more manageable. The act of writing transformed his experience from a chaotic whirlwind of emotion into something he could understand and work with. "Will you help me plant a garden this spring, Grandpa?" Tommy asked suddenly. "I want to see for myself how storms make things grow." Walter's face lit up with joy. "I thought you'd never ask," he said. "We'll plant it right there, where it will get both sunshine and storm. And every time the weather gets rough, we'll watch together and see how our plants respond." That evening, when Tommy heard his parents' voices rising in the kitchen, he didn't hide under his pillow as usual. Instead, he sat at his desk with the notebook open, writing about what he observed and felt, trying to imagine how this difficult experience might help him grow into a more understanding and compassionate person. When he finished writing, Tommy walked to his window and looked out at the old oak tree, its branches swaying gently in the evening breeze. For the first time in weeks, he felt ready to face whatever storms tomorrow might bring. The storms of his life were no longer enemies to be feared, but teachers to be respected, challenges that would help him grow roots deep enough to support not just himself, but others who would one day seek shelter in his strength. And in that moment, Tommy understood what his grandfather meant. The storm wasn't something happening to him, it was something happening for him, preparing him for a life of greater wisdom, deeper compassion, and unshakable strength. The boy closed the notebook and placed it carefully on his nightstand. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but it would also bring new opportunities to grow. And now, he was ready to embrace them both.